Banyule City Council makes planning decisions that are informed by the local planning scheme. The local planning scheme, the Banyule planning scheme, has a zoning across all of the land within Banyule. That zoning is broken up into a number of different zoning types. Where we are today, this will be zoned general residential zone. And so within this zone, one of the objectives is residential living. Also within the planning scheme are what we call planning overlays. These overlays provide another layer of direction over what is considered appropriate within the zoning that the application is made. So an application made here within your general residential zone would not only have to consider the objectives and decision guidelines of the general residential zoning, it would need to consider any other overlays that apply. Each of those overlays has its own objectives and decision guidelines. In this part of Banyule, we have an overlay called the Vegetation Protection Overlay. The Vegetation Protection Overlay is a type of overlay that occurs in all municipalities across Victoria. What makes the Vegetation Protection Overlay special here in this part of Banyule is the schedule that applies, and that schedule is specific to Montmorency, Lower Plenty, Green Hills, bit of Greensborough, and that is called Schedule 1 to the Vegetation Protection Overlay, VPO1. VPO1 is an overlay that specifically aims to protect important fauna habitat within the area that it occurs. Here, for instance. What that means is any planning application for residential use, or perhaps in a road for construction of a road or a car park, any application to undertake these works would need to consider the requirements, in particular the decision guidelines in VPO1. So an application that would impact vegetation, for instance, say to remove a tree or a number of trees, would need to include information on whether or not that vegetation plays an important role in the landscape for fauna as food, as shelter, maybe there are hollows in the tree, or perhaps as a connector to enable wildlife to move between one council reserve and another through the urban landscape. We know, for example, through the nest box survey that's been undertaken here in Montmorency, that sugar gliders occur in a nest box only about 20 metres away. They also occur in the school just over the road. We've recorded them in a council reserve on the other side of the road. And we know that gliders are moving from one council reserve through a school, through a suburban front yard, through a suburban backyard, and to a reserve on the other side of the houses. So this habitat, we know, is important because it's being relied on by fauna, local fauna species that are native to this area, for them to get their food, their shelter, and to move between reserves so that they can find a mate. And in having this vegetation, these animals are able to persist. So the information that we've just presented would be very important information to inform an application for a planning permit within this area, because we know that this vegetation is important fauna habitat and needs to be protected for those species to remain